a labyrinth of ice and rocky peaks, with mountains soaring over 4,000 meters, emerges at the very center of Europe, one of the most populated areas on the planet. This is the chain of the Alps, still, even today, the wild heart of the continent. For 5,000 years, man has sought to inhabit the more accessible areas. He has created paths and a network of roads, built villages, then cities, and has subjected the region to a multitude of changes. The various peoples who today inhabit the dense network of valleys have ended up developing a common culture built upon resistance to adverse conditions, on the seasonal advances and retreats, and of admiration, awe and respect for these giants of rock. How is it then that the Alps still preserve their wild soul? In reality, many areas, especially those at high altitudes, still remain isolated and virtually untouched. It's a world parallel to ours, a world of animals that move around us, watching us, often not far from our tracks. For these masters of survival, success is not a question of large numbers. More important is their ability to survive where others cannot. This then becomes the best of all worlds for them, life at its alpine limits. With just a few hours climbing in the Alps, we encounter the same succession of environments that can be observed in traveling across the entire continent of Europe, from the Mediterranean to northern Scandinavia. Some alpine species are really of Arctic origin and arrived at these southern latitudes during periods of glaciation. Arctic and alpine life forms have to face similar problems: low temperatures, high winds, and short seasons in which the young grow to maturity. In the mountains, there are additional difficulties, such as a rarefied atmosphere, where solar radiation is less well filtered and temperature swings are both more marked and frequent. Above all, it is the steep, often vertical nature of the terrain that makes the most difference. It can offer advantages, but requires special adaptation with an increased consumption of energy. For 1,200 kilometers, the Alps form an archipelago of vertical islands, a continuous chain of peaks and chasms, where temperature fluctuations can exceed 60 degrees centigrade between sun and shade, and where the weather changes rapidly with the passing of time. To survive in such a demanding environment, alpine birds and mammals have evolved improvements in the performance of their blood, lungs, and heart. Many invertebrates are equipped with antifreeze fluids. Plants resist freezing by accumulating more sugars than starches within their cells. An eye-catching blue color protects some flowers from ultraviolet radiation, whilst others are covered with a blanket of fine hairs that also serves to reduce moisture loss due to the wind. Through such strategies, alpine plants can survive at high altitudes, far above the snow line, capable of coping with a sudden return of cold and snow. In winter at high altitudes, the temperature difference between an animal body and its external environment can be more than 70 degrees centigrade. The thick fur of the ibex behaves like a living coat. By raising and lowering the hairs, the animal varies the amount of trapped air, effectively regulating the heat that escapes to the outside. In the long months when food sources are both rare and also have little nutritional value, anything that allows the saving of heat can prove to be vital. Even foxes living at high altitudes have a much thicker coat. A fox can sit for hours protected from the cold at temperatures as low as -20 degrees centigrade, hiding its face, the part least well covered, beneath its tail. It must save energy for a style of hunting that is highly demanding, a continuous wandering in search of something to put in its mouth. Disappointments are a way of life. This vole has dozens of hiding places and escape routes under the snow. Birds face other problems. Very strong winds can force smaller birds, such as the Alpine accentor, to remain grounded. Larger species, like eagles, can use air currents to advantage, but must also contend with a thin atmosphere, a less effective support. A change of season brings a transformation in the environment, so dramatic that many inhabitants of high altitudes need to alter their physical appearance. In its white winter coat, the alpine hare becomes less visible, but even better insulated. Each individual white hair has microscopic spaces filled with air. This benefits the hare, especially at dusk, its most active period. The cold at night becomes more penetrating. The survival of the hare depends on the protection offered by a coat that must be kept perfectly groomed, even down to removing tiny balls of snow that remain attached. When day breaks, it must redouble its attention, for even though camouflaged and highly alert, the slightest of movements can be spotted by that most efficient predator in this environment, the golden eagle. But predators are not the main cause of death in the Alps. When the soil and rocks become covered with a deep layer of snow, a long wait begins for the Alpine ecosystem, literally a freezing of life cycles that can last months. There are years when heavier snowfalls or frozen ground prevent ibex and chamois from scratching to reach the vegetation. Although equipped to survive on a minimal diet, many will not last through the winter. Birds have fewer limitations, for they can move more easily to look for food or to escape impossible conditions. By moving down from high ground, the dipper will always find a flowing stream in which to continue to feed when all higher watercourses are immobilized in the grip of ice. The ease with which they can move allows the birds more freedom than a simple change of altitudes. Siskins will move substantial distances, traveling in small flocks and invading pine and larch woods as cones ripen. But for efficiency, they cannot compete with the crossbill, whose two powerful crossed mandibles are purpose-made for this work. Without the specialized beak of the crossbill, the seed extraction technique must be completely different. What in summer is a lush green pasture can in winter become a white wasteland deep in snow. In this lunar landscape, an elderly ibex wanders aimlessly. Nearly blind from an eye infection, it advances with great difficulty. Every time the snow is too deep, progress is blocked, and it turns obsessively to the same side, leaving behind a strange spiral track. Soon it will be dark, and little by little, its hope of survival vanishes. Faced with the extreme hardship of winter, chamois move down to the valley, the last resort of every mountain animal. They are less heavily built than ibex and less well adapted to endure starvation in hard times. They abandon their fortresses of frozen rock and search lower down for the only food still available, lichens on the branches of conifers, scarcely edible and barely deserving the title food. But those steep, rocky cliffs can become a refuge. It is a challenging environment, but one rich in opportunities. On these vertical surfaces, snow does not remain long even in winter, and it is here that some birds, such as rock partridges, can continue to feed. When snow covers everything else, ibex will take refuge in this vertiginous world. On the rock slabs and cliff ledges, they can rely on a sophisticated adaptation that makes them superb mountaineers. To move in such demanding terrain, their hooves have evolved into incredibly efficient instruments. At the front, there is a hard, sharp edge, backed by a central area of rubber-like consistency, similar to the shoes free climbers use. In addition, the two halves can be spread apart elastically, so that a single half alone can stop the animal slipping. When faced with a route it doesn't know, the ibex shows caution. Retracing your steps is not always easy. Every movement is carefully measured, each sequence tried several times. There is no room for a mistake. However, on their most familiar routes, ibex move rapidly with great confidence. They always use the same small protrusions and end up placing their hooves at exactly the same points. For the greater part of winter, the cliffs are one of the few places where it is still possible to find food. The concentration of animals also attracts those who exploit the hardships of others for their own survival. The bearded vulture, a bird specializing in bones of dead animals, tirelessly scours the slopes in search of those that have fallen. The same slope, however, can unleash a trap, suddenly fatal, almost without warning. Killed by hunger, by cold, or swept away by avalanches, the carcasses of the unfortunates collect, in some years, at the base of the cliffs. Even for a pure predator like the golden eagle, it may be opportune to profit from this unexpected resource. The eagle must continue to fly, to hunt and survive at high altitudes throughout the entire alpine winter. In the open, it endures polar temperatures, strong gusts of wind and storms that can last for weeks. After these trials, a moment of midwinter madness intervenes when the courtship of the eagles begins. The male launches on swooping descents and sudden ascents, a display of strength and confidence, an exaltation in the sheer pleasure of flight. The female checks out the nests of previous years before making her choice, and the male follows her. For eagles, a bond born of mutual understanding is fundamental, and it must withstand the test of time. It will be called upon in defense of the territory and for hunting with greater success as a couple. When the time comes to feed the young, everything must function effectively. From the end of autumn, that same mating madness also afflicts the males of other species. The first signs are not particularly impressive. They just rub their horns on stems and branches to leave their scent and mark a territory. Then matters become much more serious. The challenges between male chamois reveal the astonishing capabilities of these animals. Steep slopes are their arena. They burn up the gradients in a few seconds. Heart and lung capacity, plus the endurance of muscles and tendons, will determine who has the right to pass on their genes. In December, ibex takes center stage. Who runs fastest is not important. This is a challenge based on brute force. The young start early. They need to learn to control their muscles, improve accuracy in impacts, and to respect adversaries. Because their horns really are weapons and need to be used with great care, even when the encounter is almost a game. Any advantage gained in the field must then be traded to convince reluctant females to mate. They will only be fertile for a short time, and males sense this from their odor. Now begins a lengthy period of stealthy approaches and tentative investigation. The suitor bends his head back to hide his horns and tastes the air. His sensitive tongue is alert to the long-awaited chemical signal. the black grouse, strength or speed is unimportant. It is the display that determines male success. Their parades are staged when signs of an end to the harshest season are already in the air. However, food is still scarce. Most of the land is still buried by snow, and the black grouse are forced to climb into the branches of larch trees to peck at unopened buds. If the mountains had a voice, they would surely sing the musical notes of water. The highest parts of the Alpine chain accumulate a huge mass of water in its solid form. Around 40% of fresh water reaching the plains of Central Europe originates from the slopes of these mountains, feeding rivers such as the Rhone, the Danube, the Rhine, or the Po. However, the water cycle of the Alps is changing markedly. The temperature increase here is twice the average for the planet. No one can say exactly where this will lead, but we could certainly not escape the consequences. In fact, ice holds rocks together and gives the mountains their form. With the increase in the average temperature, the soil thaws during the day only to freeze again at night, expanding as it does so and promoting the disintegration of rocks. As it runs down the valley, glacial water constantly washes the rocks, becoming enriched with salts and minerals. It also brings with it a myriad living organisms, creating a downward flow of organic material. There are those that know how to take advantage. The lives of many insect larvae are dominated by a constant effort to cling to the rocks. Even if they need to struggle to a prime position, the advantage is that food carried by the current arrives constantly. To hide from predators, caddis larvae build a protective pouch of tiny stones from the riverbed. But it is not easy to avoid a dipper's keen gaze, as it patrols incessantly, flying the stream with ease, whether above or below the water surface. Something few can do. While the high mountain is still gripped in ice, spring rises from the valley bottom with each passing day. Animals can exploit this with a descent of just a few hundred meters. With the most testing period behind them, ibex finally lose the heavy winter coat. They have endured long months on rock or in snow, For them, each new blade of grass, every scent carries a promise. The new season is coming. During the long winter, the ground has remained buried, but at the same time protected under meters of snow. The covering has kept the soil at a constant temperature of around 0 centigrade, protecting it against extreme variation. Slowly but steadily, it has been able to undergo the processes that prepare for the summer explosion. As soon as the ground is free from snow, plant shoots and insect larvae emerge in profusion into the sunlight. Truly manna from heaven for snowfinches that need do nothing more than patrol back and forth as the edges of the snow recedes. Animals that had sought refuge under the ground also emerge. Their essential life processes had slowed down during winter. A survival strategy for those that cannot migrate to warmer places as many birds do. Even marmots have emerged. Their squabbling can be used to establish a hierarchy, but more often it just seems a way of celebrating the end of winter darkness. On the heights, snow still covers large patches of land, but it does not seem to worry male ptarmigan unduly. They know that it will soon melt, and they bide their time in noisy disputes over females and the best territories. Even the rock faces are populated. Instead of descending, the female ibex took refuge on the more remote slopes. There's just one reason: the new arrivals that have been with the group for a few days. From the moment of birth and throughout the period in which the offspring are vulnerable, females guide them to the most rugged parts of their territory, gathering them in groups of tens of infants. The slope is their ally. Few predators can follow them in such an inaccessible landscape, especially over the rocks, where their agility and lightness of foot make them almost more carefree than the adults. Moments of doubt can overtake anyone, but the message is clear. Get over it. If we consider plant species, then the Alps form the richest region in Europe. 3/4 of the flowering plants of the entire European continent grow in the Alpine regions, where their showy blooms characterize the landscape. The value of this variety is not merely aesthetic. In the Alps, plants form the basis of the entire food pyramid, as they do everywhere. Thanks to their wide diversity, they provide nourishment for alpine animals at different times of the year, from the first snow melt until late autumn, and in a variety of habitats, from fertile pastures to forests, and from wet bogs to cliffs. Life may seem easy for predators at the top of the food chain. On the contrary, the whole ecosystem must function smoothly to sustain them. It is no accident that their numbers are few, and they are always teetering on the edge of survival. When the eagles have young in the nest, they have to feed them too. They know their terrain perfectly, and any animal movements within it. A weak individual or one in difficulty gets noticed straight away. Golden eagles don't solely live in mountains, but in this environment they can exploit to the full any advantages offered by differences in altitude. They hunt mainly high up, so heavy prey can be carried down to the nest sites on the cliffs below. When the bird needs to regain height, it exploits the uplift provided by air currents generated along the sides of the valley. In order to hunt, the eagle flies up to the highest altitudes, to the realm of rocks and pioneer vegetation, to the alpine tundra, where there are plants reduced to the form of cushions to protect their vital parts, and stunted trees that creep on the ground using the winter snow as a blanket. At first glance, it might seem an inanimate world. But something is moving. In these open spaces, camouflage must be total. Both mountain hare and ptarmigan have developed a biological mechanism through which they can quickly change their white winter coats. Rock coloring and slow movements in this empty terrain are the strategies through which they defend themselves from predators. These are the iconic animals of the mountains, creatures so well adapted to the rigors of surviving where others cannot. At no time of the year do they completely abandon the mountain heights. An extraordinary accomplishment, considering that at this altitude, summer is the exception and winter the rule. Even in the middle of July, it is not uncommon for seasons to regress by a few months. For young partridges just out of the nest, things could prove dramatic. However, these high-altitude specialists are well equipped to face the unexpected. Instinctively, they know it is just a matter of waiting. Only exceptionally does summer snow last more than a few days. It's just a short interlude before everything returns to normal. The season of opportunities lasts a while longer in the conifer woods that cloak the mountain flanks. But for those that need to raise a brood, there can never be too much time. Whereas the pygmy owl is usually a nocturnal predator, it now hunts in daytime as well, to fill the open beaks of its young. Targeting the best period in which to give birth and to raise young is important everywhere, but for the inhabitants of the Alps, it becomes a necessity. For instance, the productive period for plants lasts 8 months in the valley bottoms, with a corresponding period of 6 months in the mid-mountain region. In the Alpine tundra, it condenses to a mere 2 months. A large part of the mountain species' success lies in knowing how to make the most of the limited time available. And then, in the blink of an eye, autumn is here again. Caddis larvae have hatched, at least those that have escaped the dipper, and they all flutter about together on plants at the water's edge. At the mercy of air currents, they will join the flow of organic material that the wind carries back up the high mountain. Before the snow comes back to blanket everything, the slopes of the mountains still provide what the animals need as they prepare to face a long winter. In autumn, whole mountainsides become covered in ripe berries. Fruits and leaves are an extra resource at the very time the animals must accumulate fat and thicken their coats to prepare for the coldest season. As the days shorten, the arrival of winter in the heights brings a predominance of white. For alpine specialists, now is the time to adjust. Both prey and predators carry on life in their new uniforms to face the eternal challenge of not being noticed. Alpine plants and animals. Simultaneously strong yet fragile life forms. Their adaptation to life in a high mountain environment has been the key to success, but could also become their weakness. They are perfectly suited to the cold, but not well equipped to deal with the heat. A temperature increase of just 1 or 2 degrees could drastically affect their ability to survive. Throughout our planet, many species are moving inexorably upwards because of global warming and the degradation of suitable areas at lower altitudes. For this reason, the importance of high-altitude alpine environments is growing, and it is a mistake to think their isolation and inaccessibility automatically protects them. High mountains are the demanding high frontiers for the natural life of surrounding lowlands. The warning voices are there. Those very slow changes occurring within the stillness of these high altitudes most certainly herald issues that will affect our entire planet. Will we be able to hear them?